Hey guys, it's Travis from Functional Strength Wellness, and I'm here with Christina Bigelow, holistic nutritionist, and we're going to talk about digestion today. If you don't have a good digestion, obviously things can get backed up, and then your body is not clean anymore, and 2016 is the year to get clean. So very basically, thanks for seeing me today.
Thanks for having me.
So very basically, where does digestion start?
So actually digestion starts right in the mouth. So it's actually important for us to chew our food, produce what's called salivary amylase, which is our saliva actually breaking down all the food.
Right.
So just taking that time, that conscious time to actually chew our food and break it down, and that's where digestion is going to begin.
Right. And that amylase, is that a carbohydrate enzyme, or does it break down either carbohydrates or fats or proteins or all?
It breaks down everything, but it will break down carbs just a little bit more.
A little bit more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fats and stuff like that are going to be broken down by bile. Proteins are going to be broken down a little bit more by your stomach acid.
Right.
So if we get into that, so what's going to happen is all our food's going to go down through our esophagus. It's going to go through a pyloric sphincter into our stomach.
Right.
Our stomach plays such a huge role for the fact that it needs to always be regulating hydrochloric acid in our stomach. So if we have...
And what is that hydrochloric acid, just for the so?
It's basically hydrochloric acid is the digestive enzyme of the stomach.
Right.
Okay? And the only place that can hold all of this hydrochloric acid is the stomach. So when we start getting it going up and stuff like that into the esophagus, that's where it can cause damage because the rest of the body can't handle this heavy acid that's throughout the body. So every food that we consume requires a different amount of stomach acid.
Right.
So if we eat just some vegetables and stuff like that, they've got their own enzymes, they're going to break down through the stomach very, very quickly. We don't need to produce a lot of stomach acid.
Okay.
Whereas if we're eating a steak, we're going to need, a steak takes longer for the body to break down. It's a little bit heavier, so it needs higher amounts of stomach acid, which means that this proton pump that we have actually is triggered to excrete more hydrochloric acid into the stomach to lower the pH,
Right.
but it's raising the acid content
Right.
to break down all of this. So the thing is, if that's not happening, if all of that's not happening well, or we've got too much bad bacteria, or we're eating a lot of junky food, or we're drinking a lot of alcohol or anything like that that's going to start lowering the stomach acid. Dairy lowers stomach acid like you would believe, right? You have something acidic, first thing you want to do is put like Tums or something on it, right? So it just shuts it off.
And sorry, I was just going to ask you, and this is what's interesting, is that most people who have heartburn,
Yes.
or whatever you want to call it, GERDS, acid reflux, typically that's actually a symptom of low stomach acid rather than high stomach acid.
Typically.
Is that correct?
Typically, yes.
Yeah.
So what happens usually is, in our younger years, stomach acid will usually go high first before it goes low. Most people, actually I'm even finding now most people even in their 20s, some teenagers are now already at the low stomach acid point because they've put so much toxic stuff into their body that they're just not producing that stomach acid anymore. So what's happening then is the food is sitting there, it's rotting, it's fermenting, it's putrefying because there's not enough stomach acid to break it down. And if it doesn't hit that specific pH, the other pyloric sphincter that basically empties the stomach doesn't
Into
get
the small intestine.
Yeah, doesn't get triggered to actually open.
Right.
So all the food was just going to sit there. Well, it's got nowhere else to go. So now all the gases and everything's building up because now you're feeding parasites and bad bacteria. So it's creating all these gases. It's all building up. So now it's pushing up. It's pushing up on the valve that goes back into the esophagus.
Right.
Which is causing your acid reflux, which is causing the burning in the esophagus, which could be a problem because it'll lead to Barrett's esophagus and everything like that, which is actually can become very cancerous, like cancer of the esophagus.
Right.
So what happens then is doctors put people on proton pump inhibitors, so that proton pump that we talked about that excretes hydrochloric acid, they'll put them on an inhibitor so it's actually stopping the proton pump from functioning.
Right.
So stopping all stomach acid.
So that's the exact thing that we don't want to happen.
It's exactly what we don't want to happen, but they're really looking at not having holes in the esophagus and esophageal cancer and stuff like that. So,
Right. So with like a lot of, I guess, typical Western medicine, looking at it from a point of view where what's the quickest way to fix the symptom, and let's go with that. That's basically what that happens. So interesting.
Right.
So, and low stomach acid can lead to a whole lot of other things, like you were saying, like parasite infections and all sorts of things, and it could lead to whatever.
It actually ends up leading to leaky gut, which
Leaky gut
then
syndrome.
leads to autoimmune diseases like cancers and arthritis and
Now, leaky gut,
MS and all of those
Yeah,
other fun things.
right? So leaky gut, this is a huge topic. Now that's into the next section of digestion, I guess, into the small intestine now, right? Typically where
Yeah.
the leaky gut happens. So let's travel there. So far we know that stomach acid's important. Chewing your food to turn it into more of a paste, making it easier to digest in the stomach, making sure you have good hydrochloric acid in the stomach for optimal digestion. Okay. And now going into sort of the small intestine, where things can go wrong with leaky gut syndrome. So what is that?
Okay, so leaky gut is actually intestinal permeability. So some people will say they don't believe in leaky gut. Science has actually already showed us that intestinal permeability is actually a thing. So what this is it's the junctions, instead of them being
Right.
nice tight junctions for everything
Right.
to go through, they start becoming looser.
Right. So the cells are supposed to be like right beside each other.
Yeah, everything's supposed to be nice and tight, so
Right.
nothing can sort of like meander through, basically.
Right.
And now these junctions are sort of, they're getting a little looser.
Right.
Kind of like a really old worn pair of pants.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So it just gets a little bit looser and like the material really starts breaking down kind of thing.
Okay.
So everything is, so now what's happening is larger food particles and larger proteins can actually get through.
Get through the
these
junctions.
junctions.
Without being digested.
Without being digested. And then those get absorbed into the bloodstream, and then we end up creating like antibodies to target these, right? Because it's larger than the body's ever been used to.
Yes.
So they're targeting these larger proteins and creating these antibodies against it. The thing is, proteins make up every cell function of our body.
Right.
So if our body is now being triggered to target a protein, it then starts triggering to target our natural proteins within our body, which then creates the body attacking itself, which is actually an autoimmune disease.
Is this would this be something like rheumatoid arthritis or?
Yeah, any type
similar,
of
right?
any type of arthritis is actually
Right.
considered an autoimmune
Or an
disease.
autoimmune
Yeah.
dysfunction rather than
Yeah.
disease. Wow.
Anything like that, your cancers, your MS, all of it is all based off of that whole leaky gut thing. So one thing that's actually really horrible is people that drink coffee around food and people that smoke are actually prematurely emptying the contents of their stomach. That's why everybody says coffee's so great, it's the only way I ever get a bowel movement.
Right.
It's actually telling the stomach, don't worry about getting the right pH to open up that pyloric sphincter, that valve there, to empty the stomach. It's saying, I'll do it for you. So it just triggers it to open. Now we're getting, again, large food particles that are going through the body,
Gotcha.
which creates an overburden on the liver, etc., etc.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, digestion's not that it's
Oh
pretty
no, this is a
complicated.
huge topic, but it's super important, and I know that we don't want to spend a whole lot of time because these people have to watch this and go about their days, whatever. But let's recap. So to restore, first of all, hydrochloric acid.
Right.
So how can we optimize that if people, in fact, do present with low stomach acid?
Right.
Is there any sort of protocols or supplements for that?
Yeah, just a sort of a basic over-the-counter. I do what's called biotherapeutic drainage, which is really deep-seated stuff to correct the problem right at the beginning.
Okay.
So that way you're not staying on the supplement forever, because the goal is not take something for the rest of your life.
Yeah, right.
But if you just want a supplement that's going to help sort of correct the problem, getting on a digestive enzyme that includes hydrochloric acid.
Right.
It also needs to include pepsin in it, because without the pepsin you're not actually breaking down and absorbing the hydrochloric acid in
Right.
your body. So it's going to help with the uptake of hydrochloric acid. So there's some really good companies out there that have good blended brands. Usually the professional brands will help them.
Okay. And now going into leaky gut, which is what we just sort of finished with. If someone presents with that, do you have a certain protocol for that, or is there too many reasons that could happen that there's no one protocol, or if is there a common one that you can?
There is. There's like sort of a standards. You can do it. I do it two different ways.
Okay.
The way that is very supplement involved is very, very expensive.
Yeah.
I guess any leaky gut protocol is very expensive because we have to go in, do everything in very high doses because you're only absorbing such a small amount, because the small intestine is where you actually absorb all your nutrients. Since you have holes and everything going and none of the nutrients are staying in, you're not actually absorbing them now.
Okay.
So you have to put in large amounts of nutrients, which is going to obviously cost more. That way you're going to absorb a small amount, and you're going to do this for a few months.
When you say nutrients, is this
I'm talking,
food, or is this
I'm talking high amounts, so therapeutic doses only of supplementation.
Okay.
And there is a very specific protocol, and it's not like 3 or 5 supplements. It's an involved
process.
It's a very involved process.
Okay.
Again, which is why I've gone a lot through biotherapeutic drainage, because I can start doing even leaky gut with blended homeopathy. So it actually changes the terrain and starts to rebuild and refeed the body.
I was just going to ask you, so can you sum up what that biotherapeutic drainage is?
So as you can see there on my shelf, I've got all these wonderful UNDA numbers.
Yeah.
There's other companies that do it, like Dr. Rutwig's and stuff like that.
Right.
So what it is it's instead of getting one homeopathic remedy, which we're used to, those little pellets that we all take, take a couple of those, they dissolve. What this is a whole bunch in blended form.
Okay.
So you're just blending a whole bunch together. And the purpose for that is because now we're overly toxic as a society. Right. So instead of taking, if I do one remedy for children and pets, it works so well. They're not very toxic. One remedy for an adult that's drinking toxic water, eating toxic food, breathing toxic air, and then living a toxic lifestyle, now we're overly toxic. So what this is going to do is they're going to get in, they're going to help drain the toxins out of the body, change the terrain, and then when you put in supplements, your body's actually absorbing the supplements instead of the supplements sitting on the surface of toxins, which is why you'll never get off the supplement.
Makes sense.
Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So let's divulge now into, I guess, the large intestine, large colon, where things can happen there. Now, where does, and this is again that broad term that we were talking about, irritable bowel syndrome happen? Is that everywhere, or what does that term mean?
Irritable bowel is obviously more the large intestine, the colon.
Right.
So irritable bowel is traditionally either always a flip-flop of constipation and diarrhea.
Right.
So you're never going to know when you're going to get one or when you're going to get the other. So you're basically either rushing to the bathroom or sitting there for a really long time.
Or wishing you were, right?
Yeah.
So it's very inconsistent symptoms.
Absolutely.
That you're having.
Absolutely. Right? The nice thing about irritable bowel is it can be treated. It's not actually a chronic condition. It's not actually damage that's done to the body.
That would be something like Crohn's?
Crohn's is definitely damage that's been done.
Right.
Crohn's, colitis, any of those itises basically as well are damage that's done because itises are inflammation.
Inflammation, right, anywhere. Okay, so IBS protocol, again, that maybe you would typically do. Is there anything in particular? I know everything starts with lifestyle factors, by the way, guys, like the holistic lifestyle factors, nutrition, hydration, sleep, thought, breathing, and movement. But going beyond that, for IBS, because I just had a client in the other day that has IBS. So.
Yeah, and the thing is, people are like, oh, it's IBS, there's nothing I can do about it, but like I said, there's so much that can be done about it. One definitely is stress. So definitely monitoring our cortisol, because if we get really, really anxious, there's two things that are happening. One, when we're really stressed out, the body will shut down. Because basically if we're running away from danger, we can't stop and have a bowel movement. Right? So the body is actually just tightening up, it's shutting down and saying, there's no time for this. So that's one thing. The other thing is if people get so stressed out that they actually become anxious, right? They get the bad heart palpitations and huge anxiety. It's kind of like the snake when they are trying to get away from something, they like regurgitate everything back up so they can get away quickly.
Right.
We sort of get the same thing when we're overly anxious. We can also get like a lot of like looser stool and diarrhea type symptoms, right? That huge like panic attacks, anxiety can totally lead into that. So just definitely doing like adrenal protocols and watching all of that is key. And then I would say always make sure one, you're definitely watching the food that you're eating, but probiotics are going to be in no matter what digestion you're going to do, and in a human strain. So we don't want animal strain probiotics, we don't want anything like that. Definitely consume all your fermented foods, which are plant-based probiotics, but when you're supplementing it to correct something, you want human strain probiotics.
Okay, and that was sort of my last question that I wanted to ask you, was more about the supplement protocols or anything like that, but you basically just said, so human strain probiotics.
Yep. Oh, no, so...
You showed me a slide earlier, and it actually had bile in there, too.
Yeah, so
people
basic...
can supplement bile if they've had their gallbladder removed, which is important because people don't know about this if they've had their gallbladder removed.
Absolutely, yeah. If your gallbladder's been removed, so what happens is your liver itself stores your bile, which your bile is what's going to help break down your fats.
Right.
And your gallbladder squirts it excretes it.
Yeah.
Without a gallbladder, we're not excreting anything. So you can actually buy ox bile. So it's usually called bile salts when you have it, or if you look on any digestive enzyme blend, if you're getting one with hydrochloric acid, you can also find some that have ox bile in them as well.
Okay.
I carry lots here at my clinic as well.
Right.
But that will actually help excrete it. So even if you're having problems breaking down fats or your liver's sort of overburdened, always putting in something that has ox bile for 1 or 2 months usually can help take a little bit of burden off while you're doing the whole transition process. But there's a lot of other great things to take. So I usually say that besides ox bile, because that's depending on what's happening in your body, there are 5 sort of key elements that one needs for good digestion. So
Talk about those.
One is a lot of water.
A lot of water.
A lot of water. We want 2 to 3 liters of water a day.
Okay.
Okay, and that depends on, and you can do it in herbal tea form. I'm a big fan of herbal tea. Yeah. And it depends on what we're doing. If we're more active or if we're out on a hot sunny day, obviously we want closer to the 3 liters of water than the 2 liters of water.
Okay.
Oil. A good quality oil. So
now, what type of oil are you talking about here?
Any oil. So if I can break down sort of digestion for you, what we have, what our digestive tract does is what's called peristalsis, which is sort of this movement. So it's actually our intestine is a muscle.
Right.
So it does this. Now, I say if you think of your intestinal tract like a balloon, okay, and then in order to get food to move, we need certain things. So one is fiber. So if you think of fiber like your newspaper, so if you stuff that balloon with a bunch of newspaper and try doing this, nothing really is happening with that newspaper, right? It's just sort of staying there, squishing up and down, right? That's our fiber. Now, if we put in the water, which I talked about, and we do this, then what's going to happen is the more water we put in, the more the balloon or the intestines will actually sort of open up and allow that passage of the newspaper or the fiber with all the everything, all our waste that we want out, right? Fiber binds all that waste. Now, the thing is, it can be a little scratchy though still when we're doing this, right? So you're getting newspaper scratching across our balloon. So if we put in oil will actually lubricate everything, right? So oil mixing around the water, mixing up this fiber, it's going to lubricate everything. So now as we do this, everything just moves nicely through the balloon. Same with through the intestine. So we do like omega-3s, because omega-3s are really high in, they're really good for being anti-inflammatory. So if there is any inflammation going on in the intestinal tract or anywhere else through the body, a good omega-3 would work. But if you don't want to do that, I'd say even 2 tablespoons of olive oil before bed. Okay. Because that gives enough time as we're sleeping for the body to break down. We're usually not in stress. And then we can get up, have hot water and lemon in the morning, which will actually stimulate digestion and have a great bowel movement before our day even really starts.
So that's great. So people shouldn't be afraid of having a little bit of oil because it's fat. And, people, might be saying, "Oh, I'm ingesting calories before bed," but in the long run, especially if you're having digestion problems, you're going to gain weight anyways if you're having digestion problems. We'll talk about that in a second. But.
Yeah, that is such a little bit of calories, honestly,
right.
And we want good healthy fats because without fat we won't burn fat. Fats are used as fuel, fats are used as brain food, like there's so many good reasons to have fat that a whole different topic.
Okay, so water, oil.
So so good fiber, we want about 35 grams of fiber a day. Now that doesn't mean start supplementing 35 grams of fiber a day because then you'll become fiber bound, which means nothing's going to move because you're not consuming enough water, remember? So
it's not just fiber.
Water.
That makes good digestion.
Right. So, and that's the first thing people do when they become constipated is I'm taking all this fiber and now I really can't go, and I'm like, wow, you're fiber bound, like you're not moving. So our fiber is going to be coming through our foods, right? Our fruits and vegetables are naturally really high in fiber, so we want to put that. Sprinkled chia seeds, flaxseed, all of those kind of things on your salads, on your soups. Put them in smoothies, so just sort of include them in. And then if you need to up a fiber a little bit, definitely go for a good quality soluble, non-soluble blend of fiber. Like a good acacia fiber, or some people like psyllium. Psyllium really requires a lot of water, and it can still be really irritating to the intestinal tract, so I usually don't start people there. Just because I find it can irritate way too much. So a good acacia fiber or something like that would. My favorite's still chia seeds.
Chia seeds, right?
Chia seeds.
Nice and easy,
right?
Yeah.
So now we're at like water, oil, fiber.
Yes.
We've talked about probiotics.
We've talked about them.
Probiotics are very important.
Human strain.
Human strain. Take with food.
Right.
We want lower stomach acid when we take the probiotic. That way the probiotic can get through the stomach acid and break open in the small intestine.
Okay. Is there any particular food that's better to take probiotics with?
No, just food.
Yeah, just food in general?
Just food in general. Let it get through there. And the other one, which we've already talked about, is a good digestive enzyme. So if it's needed, put in that digestive enzyme with or without hydrochloric acid.
Right.
If it's with hydrochloric acid, take it during your meal.
Yeah.
If it's without hydrochloric acid, you're going to take it just before your meal.
Just before the meal?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if it's with hydrochloric acid, we don't want to be upping stomach acid without anything there for it to break down on. Otherwise, we are going to feel like we have burning and acid reflux. Gotcha. And remember, people, your stomach sits right here. Yeah. Right there. Not here. This is not stomach. This is intestines. It sits up here. So if you feel burning in there, and a good test to do to know if you have low stomach acid is if you drink a little bit of apple cider vinegar, possibly in water so it doesn't burn your throat.
Right.
And it feels like soothing, so basically you don't feel any adverse reactions. Your stomach acid is on the lower side. Whereas if your stomach acid was high, you would feel the burning right here.
You would feel it.
You would feel it right there in your stomach. It would burn, and you'd probably be in tears.
So
and then you could take a little bit of dairy, calm that down, and you know what I mean. Or just even eat a little bit more food, fatty food, right? Because like I said, that will automatically work the stomach acid. Interesting.
Okay. And finally, again, getting back to people that are trying to look their best and all this stuff. Basically sometimes going to extremes to shed fat and all this sort of thing. Again, the way I like to do things is get people cleaned up, right, healthy, and then looking good is a sort of a side effect or a byproduct of actually just being as clean and healthy as possible. So when your digestion in any of those, what we just talked about, right, any of those phases is compromised, digestion is basically elimination at the end, right? When we get everything out of our bodies. But if anything's wrong there, toxins can build up in our bodies, right? Cause a whole bunch of problems that you talked about already, but ultimately it can also be stored as body fat.
Absolutely.
Right? As adipose tissue, right?
Right, so what's happening in that case is, as a defense mechanism, so when we're getting all these toxins in, as a defense mechanism, our body is actually, I say creating fat, we don't actually create more fat cells, well, we do, but again, whole different topic on fat.
Yeah.
So what our body's actually doing is it's expanding the fat cells that we have to absorb in all toxins.
Right.
So now we're getting, instead of having this cute little tiny fat cell, which is what we need because we're going to use it as fuel, our body is now expanded, said, let's put this toxin in here because we don't want it in our bloodstream.
Right.
Right? Because our bloodstream always needs to be that very specific pH, otherwise we die. Right? So we don't want this toxins everywhere. And then the problem is once we start detoxing or doing anything else like that, even burning fat, the reason everybody always feels uncomfortable or gets detox reactions is because they're shrinking this down, pulling the toxin out, now it's going back up through their body and they're refueling it. So yeah, it's important to definitely keep our body a lot cleaner, that way we're not expanding these fat cells. So a calorie is not a calorie.
Yeah.
What calories we put in our body are definitely very important.
Yeah, where they come from, right?
Yeah.
So let's not turn our fat cells from what they were supposed to be, which is sort of fuel reserves, into toxic waste reserves.
Yes,
Right?
that's a great way to look at it.
How about that, right? And then we'll be a lot cleaner, leaner, and healthier. Well, thanks a lot for your time.
No problem.
I appreciate
So much for having
that. If anyone wants to reach you, what's the website?
www.bigelowhealth.com, or you can just reach me at 289-689-0862.
All right, so Christina Bigelow from Bigelow Health, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.